The last panel for the day is about judgments that propel economy, and I would like to begin by a quote by Wendell Holmes. The law is not the multiplication table, it is a tree that changes with every season. And our panelist here will help us understand the importance of the judgments which have been given in the past, and I hope that it will be a very informative session for you all. I would like to invite both the panelists on the stage. First we have Mr. Sridhar. Sridhar is a Mr. Sridhar is a legal professional with over 23 years of law practice experience in the highest courts of India. He is an advocate on record in the Supreme Court of India for over 13 years. He has a penchant for reading and learning about ancient Indian text and spends his leisure time in research and reading. Professional and personal inclinations for research blended in bringing contextually relevant portions for our Itihas and Indian literature into the case material filed before the court in cases which they were appropriate. He was a core member of the legal team of Sri Ram Lalla Virajman, the plaintiff in the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi case before the Honorable Supreme Court. We also have with us Mr. Sudhir Mishra. Mr. Sudhir Mishra is the founder and managing partner of the full-service law firm Trust Legal, which specializes in telecom laws, infrastructure laws, music law, ADR, health and environmental law. Mr. Mishra has a vast experience in representing clients both on the corporate and litigation side. He regularly appears before the Supreme Court, various high courts, NGT, various statutory bodies, and committees of MOEF. I hope you'll get to learn a lot. I leave it to both of you.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon. A lot of people have gone outside to seek jobs, but it won't be that easy, I can assure you. If you are staying here, maybe your chances are brighter. We have senior advocate, Sridhar Potaraju. He's a senior advocate. He has been just designated as a senior advocate. And let me tell you, this will be a very exciting panel. This will be a theoretical panel. This will be a lot of energy would be there. We are going to talk about judgments. Those judgments which are changing the destiny of country, economy of country. तो ऐसे कौन से judgment हैं और judgments economy को कैसे change करते हैं? So there is a history here. You had a power couple before this. They were husband and wife, I trust. We both started our legal journey together. I run a firm which is one of the top 20 firms in the country today, Trust Legal. Sridhar Potaraju is a senior advocate who is widely respected for his work in the Supreme Court. And I can tell you our journey and the kind of judgments which we have seen will give you a lot of glimpse what's going on and how directly things happen. For example, if you remember, that the judgment of Ram Janmabhoomi, the Ram Janmabhoomi judgment of Supreme Court led to, I'm telling you where we'll head for. Ram Janmabhoomi judgment of the Supreme Court led to creation of an airport in 2023, 2024. 24 it got inaugurated. 2024 the airport was inaugurated. 36 flights go every day. 16 five-star hotels are being made. Ritz-Carlton Hotel, which is in Bangalore, is coming up in Ayodhya. This is the direct impact of a judgment which came from the Supreme Court of India. So our discussion is going to happen on that. You know, this country had a temple economy. 1,000 years back, people used to say that, what is temple economy? When we were the student of history, we used to hear about temple economy. Today, I was born in Banaras. Now let's move from Ayodhya to Banaras. I am born in Banaras. I used to go to Banaras, find a hotel room for 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees in the pandemic or even before that. The entire Kashi Vishwanath temple was changed. It went through a lot of modification of the corridor, and 2 years of hard work happened. Last 2 years, the entire new economy of Banaras emerged. And Banaras, today, the average hotel price is 25 to 30,000 rupees. That is the impact of the kind of court judgments which have come up in last 8 to 10 years. We have somebody here, a very important person today. He was the lawyer in the Ram Janmabhoomi matter. He was the person who was working with Parashran sir, who was the Attorney General 30 years back, and who post 90 years started appearing in the Ram Janmabhoomi matter. Sridhar was the person who was constantly in that matter. He saw the entire jurisprudence of that matter. How many Chief Justices heard this case? But before you go there, just imagine Banaras and Ayodhya are top tourist destination. They get more tourists than Goa. So Sridhar, where we are heading for?
I think we are actually realizing the constitutional dream of liberty. The preamble uses the phrase liberty. If I have to just quote, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. This is what we the people have promised and guaranteed ourselves. Now, did we have this freedom? Yes, we always had the freedom to worship. But was it conditional? Was it restrained? Or was it gratis? That is the question which was probably subconscious of this country always had. Because there was a conflict insofar as our understanding of our secularism as it was implemented post the emergency amendment which brought in secularism into the preamble of the Constitution. It was not part of the original preamble. So the interpretation of secularism post 70s actually literally took away from the majority of the people of this land the freedom which they were entitled to as an aspect of liberty. Liberty of thought, faith, expression, as well as worship. So what does one do? I mean, we need to understand that India was not born on 15th August 1947. India as an amputated state, a nation state, had liberated itself of a lot of legacy of probably more than 1,000 years of invasions, colonization. It left a very deep impact on the people's subconscious minds. So the first level was to become self-sustained, to make two ends meet. So 2 square meals were the biggest achievement of a day for majority of the population, and probably it still is. The next level will be your education, access to literacy. Here I would like to draw a caveat. I mean, people keep talking about literacy. I think literacy and education are completely distinct and different concepts. And we should not confuse literacy with education. Because we know, as a matter of fact, some of the states which celebrate their 100% literacy states are the states the violence is such that even uneducated people would actually shudder to behave like that. But they are literate supposedly. So I think literacy and education are two different concepts which were never understood in the manner they should have been. Unfortunately, we chased literacy as against education. And in some of my writings, I did mention that probably India has survived this Montessori certificate, degree-driven, hollow education, probably because majority of them were outside that system. They chose to remain wise, probably not literate by the Western standards. They are wise. Why? They are wise because their value system was intact. Their value system is rooted in our civilizational values. What are the civilizational values we are talking about? Dharma and Satya are the civilizational values of Bharat. So if you look at the national motto, Satyameva Jayate. So what we actually celebrate is truth. And that is the motto for all the high courts, Satyameva Jayate. Now when it comes to Supreme Court, it is Yato Dharmas Tato Jayaha, which is let Dharma succeed wherever it is. So now when we have these two core ideas which actually keep the citizen, irrespective of their literacy as per whatever Western yardsticks are, where do they get this understanding of wisdom from? This understanding of wisdom comes from our own itihasas, Puranas, or cultural heritage that we have inherited for thousands of years. Now, two things need to be made clear. A cultural and a civilizational heritage could be a larger canvas which also encompasses a religious aspect. And it's not the other way around. The identity of Bharat or India or Hindustan is a geographical identity. The Bharatiya identity is a geographical identity, within which you have a cultural, civilizational and heritage related continuity from north to south and east to west. Now, what is it that connects all these things together? It is the role models which have emerged over hundreds and thousands of years through our itihasas. We need to understand one thing. Most of the cases, especially in the Ram Janmabhoomi cases, the biggest challenge was, where is the evidence? Where is the birth certificate? Where is the Aadhaar card? Kind of questions of existence of certain people we all relate to. Unfortunately, we had to face a task which probably no other faith would ever face again on planet Earth. To prove the existence of your faith after about 500 years of decimation of a place of worship. Now, when I spoke to liberty of worship, this is where it connects back. If I have a liberty of worship, where does it take me? How do I exercise that right? In a civilized manner, a person who's aggrieved would only go to a dispute redressal mechanism which is available under the Constitution, which is going to a court. And that is precisely what was done in this case or several other cases which are landing before courts. And we have examples in other places across the globe where other faiths are also seeking to recover and their modes are different.
हाय भाई साहब बाहर बात करो जाके.
So I think this brings to the core what is it that actually we are seeing as an economy now, and what was it that was happening pre-invasions and colonization, and why were they targeted to begin with? I think that's a simple question. Why were the temples targeted? If temple was a place of worship, of a superstition, what was the need to target it? You could just ignore it. The reason being that temples played the role of a mother for this culture. Temples took care of everyone's needs in the society. We are an integrated society. We are a self-sustained society. A village economy, a state or a nation which is completely integrated on principles of Satya and Dharma, which are concepts, which are universal. Therefore, to eliminate the freedom of thought, the invaders realized, apart from the wealth that these places were controlling, they were the places of strength, not merely in the military sense, but also intellectual strength that they gave to the society and the members of the society. Therefore, it was targeted.
Yeah. Good initial part before we'll come to the salient aspects of the Ram Janmabhoomi judgment. And nobody, when people were opposing this case, people were also opposing why courts are interfering in these matters. Earlier people wanted to have a different narrative. Then when the courts started looking into it, then the courts were also being criticized. And what an interesting thing. When we talk about economy, what we forget is also that 8 or 9 years, 12 years back, during the Congress rule, a Vodafone decision was taken by our country that we'll have a retrospective tax. I'm deliberately going on a very wide canvas. You'll be surprised while the present government has talked about opening Indian legal sector. जिसको इसको job चाहिए ध्यान से सुनो, young students के लिए. Indian legal sector should open to the foreign law firms. Biggest debate in India. That the foreign law firms will come, पैसा ही पैसा होगा. ठीक है, वो जो हमारे माइंड में कॉन्सेप्ट है, उसमें जो सबसे बड़ा हर्डल है श्री, that hurdle is the Vodafone decision of the government that we will tax whenever we want to, from whichever date we want to. And that is the debate going on in the rest of the world कि हमें वहाँ जाना चाहिए. कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं होगा कि मैं एक लार्ज लॉ फर्म अमेरिका की हूँ, यूरोप की हूँ, पर भारत बोलेगा मैं इसको पूरा का पूरा टैक्स कर दूंगा आपके ग्लोबल रेवेन्यूज को. एक तो वो जजमेंट है जो हमको प्रॉब्लम्स में डालता है, उस तरह के जजमेंट्स. नाउ हियर यू हैव अ जजमेंट ऑफ राम जन्मभूमि which was supposed to be regressive or whatever, or something which the court should not have got into it. And the entire impact of the judgment is so huge on the economy of this country, on the well-being of this country. There are lakhs of jobs being created now. Opportunity will come up. It's not for 1 or 2 or 3 villages or 3 towns. It is going to connect this entire country, as you rightly said in your opening remarks, that this was not a geographical boundary. When you talk about when you talk about Kashi, they say that Kashi is a place where you destructed temples after every 2 or 3 centuries. Every time the language and culture migrated to safer places, and it came back to Kashi when the things were better. So your Sanskrit, your Ved Pandits, your scholars, they actually migrated to far safer places south of Vindhyas, and they came back when the situation became anukul for them. So the judgments actually reflect our cultural ethos.
I think our constitution itself is an embodiment of a value system as a civilization. It has taken contemporary references from the various other constitutions as well, but the core of it, as I see, is dharma and satya, as I pointed out. Now, when you have your concepts clear, I think there was no problem. But when your concepts are confused or blurred, then there is always a lot of anarchy and chaos in the society. And there will be a lot of spins which are given, and narratives are spun, which actually confuse a few generations. Now, how does one decipher that? It's a very simple test, I would say. Any big university or any university would actually try to present the case of a particular subject. Let me put any subject as a matter of fact. I'll take history because that's the topic of relevance now. If they teach history as an academic place which promotes freedom of speech and also liberty of thought expression, how much space do they give for a contrarian view, or does the academic space have its own view? So that's the core of the problem. Now, if you look at the history curriculum of our country, I am a commerce graduate and I practice law, and I had no occasion to read about history probably before I got into this case. What has happened, as I see here, is this judgment has actually unearthed a very grave disservice by the academia of this country in writing the history of this country. I would strongly recommend everyone to read the judgment in Ram Janmabhoomi case as to what the academicians did to our history. That's the core of this entire debate. The academicians who were in charge of writing history of our land were put to cross-examination. I would not like to name anyone, but they actually were an embarrassment in the name of academics. They put their ideology above their integrity as a teacher, as an academic, and that's what really pained me. I may like something, I may dislike something. I'm a professional. I have an integrity as a professional. And if a teacher compromises or actually puts their ideology above their integrity as an academician, the country is definitely going down, because they are the people who are guiding the children. They are the people who actually, I can say, poisoning the minds of the children, and the children who study history come out confused. I mean, I was confused because when I traveled to temples across the country, it's the same Ramayana, it's the same Mahabharata. But when I read my history books, there's no reference to any of this. It's a confusion I always had as a young kid, and as I grew up, I couldn't reconcile this. Why is it called mythology? Whereas when you go to any other place in the world, they refer to it as history. In fact, Indonesia acknowledges this as part of their cultural heritage. So this was the confusion which has been consciously brought into our narrative. Now what this judgment has done is clear the minds of the people of this confusion which is motivated and it was maliciously introduced. And it has unearthed the great disservice of academia in this space. And once the mind is clear, everything else is liberated.
Shri, we are at the last round of our points on this matter and also about the judgment. Tell us a few interesting aspects as a counsel of the matter, like when you can't forget that day of court proceedings, how you saw Parashan sir argue or take up a point, just for our audience understanding which they can take away with them. That day's event, anything which you strikingly remember?
One thing I would like to clear, I mean, there's been a legend which has been going around, which keeps saying that Sri Parasran sir was not wearing his footwear while arguing. It's a pure legend. In fact, he was very well wearing his footwear, and in fact, I pointed out and he's laughed. But actually, it was Mr. C.S. Vaidyanathan who would remove his shoes, and he was the one who was arguing barefooted. So I think this is something which has developed as a legend, because I think the traits have merged like in a Bollywood script. Coming back to one of those moments, I mean, I think this is a case which was of great significance and the tempers were flying high in the court. An eminent senior counsel appearing on the other side was quite provocative, and that's his style of advocacy. And in the course of his arguments, he did raise an issue of the demolition of the structure in '92, and then he was very passionately abusing the other side. And then he was on, and then he makes a statement that once it was a particular place of worship for a particular faith, it always remains to be so. So that's the substance of the statement he makes. So the court paused and then looked at Mr. Parasran and then asked him, what do you say about this statement? So, and then Mr. Parasran at 92, feeble, he gets up, and this was absolutely like what we would see in drama or a film. And it was happening live in front of their eyes. The court was jam-packed and there was pin-drop silence because nobody had a clue as to how he would respond to that question, because everyone knows it's a lived history that there was a structure which was brought down. And he's saying that once it was a structure belonging to a particular faith, it will always remain. And the brilliance of this advocate and his presence of mind, he got up and said, my lords, once a temple, always a temple, and definitely Ram and his place of birth preceded Babur. And that's the end of the entire case. At that moment, defined the case, which way it was going. Because ultimately, if you're looking at a timeline, it was an admitted case that there was no evidence of any kind of worship by the Muslims prior to 1850s. There was no evidence. So that is the case which is on record. It is a statement recorded in the judgment. Unfortunately, a lot of ideologues have been criticizing the judgment without actually putting forward the pleadings or the judgment evidence which has been part of the judgment. And another issue probably which came up was whether there was any labor room in Dasharath's palace. Where is the labor room? This was part of a cross-examination of a witness. It was quite offending to be asked such a question. I mean, you don't ask, delivery kis kamre mein hua hai, to anyone. It's quite a personal space, and you respect a motherhood happening. But unfortunately, this was part of the cross-examination in the trial stage, and then Parasran sir raised this issue. And he said, it is Emperor Dasharatha. He definitely had enough space to have a labor room. And the place where the people worship as Janmasthan was the labor room. That's how I think it was like a momentous thing.
And Shri, one last thing which before we end, I want to ask you that religion is something very personal to all of us. I know you for 30 years now. A lot of young students are also here, and they will go and tell this to other students. What has been your journey of dharma? And I have seen some part of it, that you become a senior advocate while you were also going for the Ram temple's inauguration, Pran Pratishtha. I won't use the word inauguration. Ram coming to his temple. And I think just before you were leaving for Ayodhya, your designation by the Honorable Supreme Court of India happened. I was not in India at that time, and I was in London in my chambers. I couldn't believe it was like, अगर आप लोगों ने वो देखा है श्री राम के ऊपर एक भजन जो है जिसमें एक आर्मी वाले वो थे और उनकी दीपिका जी जो सीता बनी थी वो हार पहना रही हैं और वो हार गिर जाता है और अचानक पता चलता है कि जिनको वो लोग सोच रहे थे कि उनकी मृत्यु हो गई है आर्मी ऑफिसर की, वो एक्चुअली जीवित थे और आर्मी के लोग उनको वापस उनके घर ला रहे हैं और उसने अपनी माँ को प्रॉमिस किया था कि मैं अगली दीपावली पर माँ तुम्हारे साथ आऊँगा, जबकि उसके ऊपर माला पहने हुए थे और वो वापस आते हैं, पैर टूटा हुआ है उसमें आते हैं। ये मैंने देखा था और फिर मैंने आपके डेजिग्नेशन के बारे में सुना। यू आर ए फर्स्ट जनरेशन लॉयर फ्रॉम हैदराबाद हु केम टू दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी टू कैंपस लॉ सेंटर. You lived a life of dignity, integrity. I've seen it from close. You are an inspiration to all the younger people who want to come in the legal profession. For me, who was an outsider, it was like a chilling thing to feel that you are leaving for Ayodhya, and Lord Ram first talked about your designation.
Well, I think that's a providential blessing because this application process was pending for more than 2 years. So we were not knowing what's happening or when it will going to come. So I was scheduled to leave on 20th morning, and 19th evening this notification came about the designation. So I always felt, I mean, it couldn't have been timed any better because the first appearance I did was before Ram Lala, after getting designated. I mean, that's the great honor I feel I had been conferred with. Be that as it may, I think as a counsel or as a person, as you rightly said, our spiritual space is very, very private and it's sacred. And I personally believe, I mean, Bhagavad Gita says the same thing. Whatever form or whatever may you worship, as long as you do it honestly, you reach God in whatever name you call. Because for us, as people of this land, Sanatan, we worship energy and then we start giving it forms and aspects, and then we give them human qualities and you give them human traits. It caters to the level of evolution, spiritual evolution of an individual, and it provides for every spectrum, from an atheist till a highly evolved soul who thinks is Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma. So it has various shades. So therefore, every other faith is very well encompassed within our faith system. And that's why diversity can thrive only in our land. Unlike any other lands where there is insecurity, there is a need to recruit, there is a concept of heathen, there is a concept of inquisition, there is a concept of kafir, there is a concept of actually kufr, which is not there because it's a way of life which allows you to climb the ladder spiritually to a state of Aham Brahmasmi, where you are one integral part of the larger cosmos or the universe. And you worship energy, which you give the form of a Shakti. The Navaratri, we form various aspects of Shakti is worshipped. So I think, unfortunately, the political aspect of faith has dominated our discourse for 1,000 years. And that had to be met only politically. You can't treat a political problem spiritually. And that's what even Ramji showed. A great Shiv Bhakt with 10 heads was brought to ground and was killed. So हम सर तो हर साल हर गांव में रावण को जलाते हैं. So that is the punishment we give, even though he was a Ravan Brahm. So for us, Dharm and Sat are the two characteristics which will determine whether you can be a role model or you will be a Ravan who will be burnt every year.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm very thankful to you. We are absolutely out of time. If you have one or two questions, you are most welcome to ask the panel. कोई प्रश्न? Okay, so we finished the panel. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
I would first like to thank both our panelists, and I'm sure that this session was a perfect end to the extraordinary series of session at Vidhi Utsav. I'm sure that the audience enjoyed it thoroughly, and it has stirred some very important conversations as well. I would now like to request Dhyani sir to present both our panelists with mementos. Sudhir sir and Sridhar sir. Give them a huge round of applause. I request you all to pose for the group picture.